allow me to begin and start by saying good afternoon and welcome to the book launch. I am Camilla Naidu, the Dean in the Faculty of Humanities, and I'm very happy to see you all today. Africa Day is observed on the 25th of May each year to commemorate the founding of the Organization of Africa in 1963 and its transformation into the African Union in 2002. On the year's celebration, Routledge released a book titled Africa's Soft Power, Philosophies, Political Values, Foreign Policies, and the Cultural Exports by Dr. Oluwaseun Tella, who is the director of the Future of Diplomacy Research Group at the University of Johannesburg's Institute for the Future of Knowledge. The 7-chapter book examines the ways in which 4 key states in Africa, South Africa, Nigeria, Kenya, and Egypt, exercise their soft power, which Tella defines as an actor's ability to influence the action, inaction, position, and behavior of other actors through its non-coercive capability. And this includes philosophy, culture, values, and policies. This is the first book on Africa's soft power, and Tella's quest to Africanize our understanding of soft power is commendable. It is common knowledge that the world still regards Africa as a problem continent characterized by diseases and wars and famine and corruption and poor governance. The outbreak of COVID-19 starkly revealed global perceptions of Africa. In the early stages of the pandemic, a report by the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa stated that between 300,000 and 3.3 million Africans would most likely lose their lives to the virus. Thus far, the continent has proved the doomsayers wrong and has managed the pandemic better than other continents. It is within this context that one can locate Tella's book, as he draws on 4 prominent African philosophies: South African Ubuntu, Nigerian Omolúwàbí, Kenyan Harambee, and Egyptian Pharaonism, and other sources of these states' soft power, such as South Africa's constitutional order, Nigeria's Nollywood, Kenya's economic diplomacy, and Egypt's Pan-Arabism, to conclusively debunk the notion that Africa lacks agency. Africa has indeed developed agency around the notion of African solutions to African challenges, which finds practical expression in the African Union's Agenda 2063, a normative and strategic framework that seeks to ignite the continent's growth and development and position it as a global force. So I'm delighted to be part of this wonderful event that boasts panelists who are distinguished academics from across Africa and with a deep understanding of the topic, and chaired by our illustrious Professor Thuli Madonsela. I'd like to give you a little bit of Prof. Madonsela's biography. Professor Thuli Madonsela, an advocate of the High Court of South Africa, is the Law Trust Chair in Social Justice and a law professor at the University of Stellenbosch, where she conducts and coordinates social justice research and teaches constitutional and administrative law. She is the convener of the Social Justice M-Plan, a Marshall Plan-like initiative aimed at catalyzing progress towards ending poverty and reducing inequality by 2030, in line with the NDP and Sustainable Development Goals. A multiple award-winning legal professional with over 50 national and global awards, Thuli Madonsela has 8 honorary Doctor of Laws degrees, one of which was awarded by the Law Society of Canada. She holds a BA Law from the University of Swaziland, a Bachelor of Laws from Wits University, and a Harvard Advanced Leadership Certificate. Thuli Madonsela was the Public Protector of South Africa from 2009 to 2016. She is credited with transforming the institution by enhancing its effectiveness in promoting good governance and integrity, including ethical governance and anti-corruption in state affairs. She was named named one of Time 100's most influential people in the world in 2014, Forbes Africa Person of the Year in 2016, and one of BBC's 100 Women. Her peer recognition includes the Commonwealth Lawyers Association's Truth and Justice Award, Transparency International's Integrity Award, South African Law Society's Truth and Justice Award, the Sydney Felicia Kentridge Award, Botswana Lawyers Association Honorary Bar Membership, the German Presidential Medal, the African Peer Review Mechanism Anti-Corruption Crusader Award, Rotary International's Paul Harris Fellow Recognition, and the Gauteng Premier's Provincial Achiever Award. Wow, we are indeed honored to have you here at UJ. And I now hand over to Prof. Madonsela to chair this virtual book launch. I thank you very much.
Well, just firstly to say thank you for the privilege to be part of this event. And I must say to the colleagues that the book is a timely project and I have learned a lot. The speakers that will speak today is the main author, Dr. Oluwaseun Tella. He is the director of the Future of Diplomacy Research Group Institute for the Future of Knowledge at the University of Johannesburg, UJ. That's going to be the main speaker and the main author of the book that we're going to discuss today on Africa's soft power, philosophies, political values, foreign policies, and cultural experts. And after Professor Tella has presented an overview of the book, we're going to have two discussants, Prof. Peter Kajwanja and Prof. Christopher Isike. Prof. Peter Kagwanja is the President and Chief Executive of Africa Policy Institute, Nairobi, Kenya, and an adjunct professor of diplomacy and international studies at the University of Nairobi in Kenya. And then we have from the Professor Christopher Isike from the Department of Political Sciences at the University of Pretoria. Prof. Tella, I had never seen the concept of Ubuntu presented in the manner that you present it in the book. And I learned a lot about Harambee. I learned a lot about the Nigerian value system. And I certainly had not heard much about Pharaonism. And I think it is a privilege to introduce you to this book launch for you to present us with an overview of the book, the thinking behind it, and the agenda setting process that you expect from it. Over to you, Prof. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Madonsela, for your kind introduction. Before presenting a synopsis of the book, I find it absolutely imperative to give honor to whom honor is due and to welcome our distinguished guests in an authentic African manner. I would like to express my gratitude to the Institute for the Future of Knowledge, most especially the dynamic and sagacious Director and Director of Research, Professor Alex Broven and Anthony Casiboni, respectively. The value the Institute places on research contributed to the successful completion of the book. To our distinguished guests, Sambo Nani, Dumelang, Unakaribishwa, how you na deo, you na welcome. Having researched on the concept of soft power in Africa for several decades and lived in both Nigeria and South Africa, and visited a couple of other African states, I think I'm well placed to write a book on Africa's soft power. For brevity, I have organized this presentation in this order. After the introduction, I would engage the key philosophies of the four stage studies and of the four case studies. I would then examine two other sources and two limitations to each of these states' soft power. Following Joseph Nine's introduction of the concept of soft power as part of the balance of international relations in 1990, the concept has become fairly ubiquitous across the globe. However, the term remains undeveloped in Africa, and as Professor Naido noted, this is the first book publication on Africa's soft power. In simple terms, power is the capacity to influence the behavior of others. In doing this, an actor, in this case, state or non-state, can rely on its soft power, that is, its attractive capacity, including its philosophy, political values, foreign policies. Alternatively, an actor can depend on its hard power, that is, its coercive capacity, mainly its economic and military might. In other words, while hard power is power of coercion, soft power is power of attraction. Given the fact that Nine's conceptualization of the term is Americentric, as he idolizes American popular culture, liberal ideas, and foreign policy posture, the immediate task of the book was to de-Americanize and Africanize the concept of soft power. In de-Americanizing the concept, I drew attention to some of the soft power attributes of BRIC states, most especially Russia and China. For example, China's Confucianism that stresses the primacy of the group is antithetical to American value of individualism. Similarly, the Beijing consensus, as opposed to the Washington consensus, that has successfully combined economic liberalism and political authoritarianism, has debunked American and by extension, Western notion of the inextricability of economic liberalism and political liberalism. In Africanizing the concept, I engage prominent African philosophies, including Nigerian Omolúwàbí, South African Ubuntu, Kenya Harambee, and Egyptian Pharaonism. A common feature of these philosophies is the fact that they stress the notion of collectivism as opposed to American individualism. Indeed, the outbreak of COVID-19 and the attendant vaccine nationalism that has frustrated global efforts to combat the pandemic is a testimony to the salience of collective action to fight the dark sides of globalization. South African Ubuntu underscores values such as reciprocity, humanity, sharing, and forgiveness. Some of South African foreign policy objectives, such as the promotion of human rights and a just international order, are embedded in the principles of Ubuntu. And so it is no wonder that the 2011 white paper on South African foreign policy was titled Building a Better World, the Diplomacy of Ubuntu. In concrete terms, South Africa displayed Ubuntu when it invited other African countries to participate in the 2018 BRICS Summit, which was hosted by South Africa. Omolúwàbí is an ideal that one is expected to strive for in the Yoruba community of Nigeria, as it basically gives parameters for acceptable behavior, including humility, modesty, integrity, and social responsibility. From a realist lens, there is no morality in international politics. However, Omolúwàbí stresses the salience of morality in our quest to have a better world. Kenya's Harambee underscores values such as reciprocity, social responsibility, and community self-reliance. The ongoing effort to combat COVID-19 has laid to bear the significance of Harambee. Africa, for me, one of the reasons Africa has been able to manage the pandemic better in comparison to other regions is the fact that Africa realizes the fact that its health system is quite fragile. So Africa has relied on self-help system, community self-help system, to fight the pandemic. And the reality of this is that it has reduced the spread of the disease and also reduced the burden on hospitals. Pharaonism, it's an epistemological position that challenges Western narratives of Egyptian history and a political framework that speaks to Egyptian decolonization, and to use the preferred term of my UNISA colleagues, decoloniality. As Diop reminds us, Egypt was the cradle of civilization for 10,000 years, while the rest of the world wallowed in barbarism. Indeed, Egyptian civilization and pharaonic past draw many foreign tourists to Egypt annually, who are left in a state of open-mouth bewilderment when they visit Egyptian museums. And of course, this has significant impact on Egypt's GDP. At this junction, I would like to move to other sources and limitations of this key state's soft power. The Nigerian film industry, popularly called Nollywood, is undoubtedly a global phenomenon, having emerged as the second largest movie producer, only behind Nollywood and Bollywood. The film industry produces about 2,500 movies, and it realizes about $600 million annually. While Africa used to be a major importer of popular culture, thanks to Nollywood and Nigerian music, which is popularly called Afrobeat, Africa has emerged as a critical exporter of popular culture. And it is within this context that I argue that, given the ubiquity and admiration of Nigerian Nollywood and Afrobeat, African entertainment wears a made in Nigeria label. And on the basis of Nollywood's influence, it creates a platform for Nigeria to spread its culture in Africa and further afield. And it also provides a platform for Nigeria to challenge anti-Nigerian sentiment. The Nigeria Technical Aid Corps Scheme was established in 1987, and it provides a platform for Nigeria to channel its aid to African, Caribbean, and Pacific states. The major objective of the TAC, Technical Aid Corps Scheme, is to provide Nigerian technical know-how to the Global South in critical areas such as academia, law, medicine, and engineering. Given the positive contribution of this scheme, recipient states and international organizations like ECOWAS, the African Union, the Commonwealth, and the United Nations have commended this program. And some of these organizations have actually sought Nigeria's advice on how to establish similar schemes in their domain. A major constraint to Nigerian soft power is its image problem. This is compounded by the Nigerian criminal networks involved in illicit activities such as drug dealing, drug trafficking, advanced fee fraud, and internet scam. And also, it's important to point our attention to the activities of Boko Haram. The Boko Haram reign of terror has punctured Nigeria's image as a major peacemaker on the continent, begging the question of hegemony or survival. And this implies that rather than being seen as a guarantor of peace, Nigeria is increasingly seen as a source of insecurity in West Africa and Central Africa. South Africa's attractiveness to other states stems from the international clout of some of these prominent political leaders, such as Nelson Mandela, Walter Sisulu, and Mbeki. Nelson Mandela was not just a symbol of the struggle against the apartheid regime. It was an icon of reconciliation. The era of Thabo Mbeki marked a shift, it marked a dynamic era in South Africa's foreign policy. His vision of African Renaissance that found practical expression in the new Partnership for African Development seeks to provide African solutions to African challenges. And in doing this, it gives African ownership of its developmental initiative. More than 120 and about 230 South African companies are operating in Nigeria and Tanzania, respectively. And by the end of 2020, MTN had 76.5 million subscribers in Nigeria. These realities point to the fact that South African companies have penetrated the entire continent and, of course, further afield. These companies serve dual soft power purpose. First, they serve as the agents of South African liberalism, and this significantly hits these companies' economic gains, and by extension, it benefits South African economy. Secondly, these companies promote their brands and by extension, a positive image for South Africa as consumers across the world consume South African fashion, groceries, and South African entertainment and other services. The triple challenges of poverty, inequality, and unemployment are the major domestic constraints to South Africa's soft power. And the implication of this is that the resources that are meant to promote South African foreign policy are challenged to domestic imperatives. And this is reflected in the declining budgets of key departments, such as the Department of International Relations and Cooperation and South African National Defense Force. While the apartheid administration's potential soft power was punctured by racism, post-apartheid South Africa's soft power has been significantly tarnished by xenophobia. Among others, Egypt's soft power stems from former President Nasser's Pan-Arabism. Nasser's administration exposed Arab governments that were not taking Pan-Arabism seriously. And this, as a result of Nasser's charisma, coupled with his powerful speeches, this ignited public protest across Arab countries. So basically, Egypt served as a trailblazer for Pan-Arabism and also a model that other Arab countries followed. Now, the decline and the defeat of Egypt during the 1967 Arab-Israeli War led to the end of Nasser's Pan-Arabism. And in contemporary times, there have been debates around the significance of Pan-Arabism. However, the 2011 Arab Spring rekindled the relevance of Pan-Arabism in the region. The significance of the Liverpool player Nessim and Mo Salah on Egypt's soft power cannot be denied. Amongst other achievements, Mo Salah won the UEFA Champions League, the African Player of the Year award, and the English Premier League Player of the Year award. In fact, Arababa notes that Mo Salah's arrival in Liverpool led to 18.9% drop in hate crime and 50% drop in Liverpool fans' anti-Islamophobic comments. The chants made by some of these Liverpool fans are germane in this regard. For example, during Liverpool's match against FC Porto in the UEFA Champions League in 2018, some of the fans chanted, "If he scores a few more, I'll become Muslim. In a mosque, that's where I want to be." Indeed, Mo Salah's influence has actually made some fans in England, including someone like Ben Bird, to convert to Islam. Following the 2011 Arab Spring, Egypt's soft power, and basically Egypt has been characterized by political instability. And this is compounded by the LCC administration, its administration's repressive approach, seen basically in the intolerance of opposition and human rights abuse. What partly contributes to Egypt's decline is the rise of the West, and I think that has to be emphasized. For example, Turkish TV series are the dominant ones in the region. The largest ones are in UAE, and the most important news channel, Al Jazeera, is in Qatar. And in terms of geopolitics, Egypt has lost its influence in from Palestine to Syria and Libya. Kenya's soft power stems from the impact of its athletes that compete in international sporting events. Kenya has produced more than Olympic medalists and world record holders in distance running events than any other country. The success of each of these athletes, with the attendant waving of the country's flag and the singing of the national anthem, provides an instant global visibility and also challenges negative stereotypes such as corruption and electoral violence associated with the state. The soft power advantage of Kenya's dominance in international sporting events is perhaps best appreciated when one looks at the intersection of sports, politics, and diplomacy. For example, the Kenyan government deployed one of the most celebrated athletes, Tengla Lerope, as a special envoy to Darfur and northern Ugandan conflict. Kenya's strategic location in East Africa, thanks to its seaport in Mombasa, which is the largest in the region, and also its diversified economy, particularly when you compare it with other states in the region, informs its foreign policy objective of economic diplomacy. Thus, Kenya is a gateway to the landlocked states such as South Sudan, Burundi, and the DRC. Kenya also serves as a bridge between East Africa and Central Africa. So it is not surprising that Kenya is a major manufacturing service hub for both sub-regions. It is within this context that Kenya sees its membership of East African Community as a vehicle to promote economic diplomacy. Now, in terms of the limitations to Kenya's soft power, following the 2007 electoral violence that led to the death of about 1,000 and the displacement of about 650,000 people, Kenya has become notorious for electoral violence, and this has punctured its image as a stable and peaceful country. And this is compounded by ethnicity, as successive Kenyan administration has been, entrapped in ethnic chauvinism. In conclusion, soft power is not often associated with Africa. However, this book has shown that Africa can lay claim to many soft power sources and potentialities. May the ultimate soft power and hard power force bless Africa. I thank you.
Thank you, Prof, for the wonderful overview on your book. The book itself, you must agree with me that the book is a masterpiece. I have read a lot about soft power recently, and I had the privilege of sharing a platform with Joseph Nye, who invented the concept. But this particular masterpiece pulls all of the strings together in terms of what is soft power, what are the levers of soft power in Africa, what are some of the emerging trends that Africa could leverage, what are some of the problems though where Africa is not leveraging the soft power it potentially has as a continent and as different countries, and of course then also talking specifically about some of the underpinnings of soft power that Ubuntu, Harambee, Omolúwàbí, and Pharaonism. I don't want to analyze this speech because we have two experts in the room that are going to specifically do that. Let us ask Prof. Kagwanja, will you please take the floor, sir, and give us your own response to the presentation by Dr. Tella. Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues. Greetings from Nairobi, the land of Harambee. Very cold now. Very cold. We are persevering. Now, let me first start by recognizing our senior colleagues who are in this virtual launch of really this seminal book on Africa's soft power. First, to thank Oluwaseun Tella for basically braving his way into finding the meaning of this concept within the African context, and basically asserting that Africa truly is an emerging soft power like other powers. To recognize the presence of Tuli Madonsera, Professor Kamira Naidu, Professor Christopher Isike, and other colleagues who are in this gathering. I was privileged from the outset to have worked with, to have read Terra's book when he invited me to contribute a blurb to the book before it was published. And I was really looking forward to the launch of the book on Africa Day. Actually, to be sure, I had basically prepared a review to publish in our local Kenyan media. Just let the people here in East Africa know that there are people who care about the way Africa is viewed, all is projecting itself on the global sphere. So thank you very much, Tella, for that invite. Coming to the book, I find the book not only very useful and instructive, but very, very organized in terms of the development of the concept. And it is, although it is not dovetailing in the major debates we have had in Africa since the year 2000, it is basically laying ground for them in way of enabling us to see where we are coming from and where you're going to in terms of discourse. By choosing the concept soft power, as opposed to hard power, or maybe smart power, or sharp power, is making the point that we need to see Africa at the same level with other powers, because soft power is not only reflective of the culture of the people, it is also reflective of the kind of resources that we can deploy in negotiation or in interaction with other civilizations. And therefore, Africa in its own right is a civilization with all the technologies and mechanisms and resources of soft power. I think that's what makes this book a tour de force in terms of scholarship in Africa. I have written, others have written, my friend David Munyai and others have written on soft power, but only in regard to China, trying to see how China, through its Confucian Institutes and other technologies, is essentially projecting its power in Africa as a soft power rather than a hard power. Now, I did stay in South Africa for almost a decade, between 2001 to around 2010, when my family eventually located from South Africa to Nairobi. I mean, actually to Addis Ababa and finally to Nairobi in 2013. And I had debates with my senior colleagues, Adam Habib, Marxis Skuman, and others on the question of regional power. I remember the same powers were chosen: South Africa, Kenya, Nigeria, and Egypt. And the debate we had at that time was that of regional hegemons. And the logic in our analysis was the logic of hard power, not soft power. We argued that South Africa is a regional hegemon in Southern Africa. Kenya and Ethiopia would have what we call a dual hegemony in the Horn of Africa, Egypt in North Africa, and Nigeria in West Africa. And we studied their interventions, whether it's through ECOWAS, SADC, or IGAD, in regard to conflict resolution and so on. Tella is introducing a new concept within the same framework. He takes the four powers, South Africa, Kenya, Nigeria, and Egypt, and now examine not their hard power, but their soft power. Why? Because in the 21st century, it is soft power that is determining the influence that countries are exercising on the global sphere. And therefore, it's basically a novel thought to replace regional power based on hard power with regional power based on soft power. I think that's really, to me, the gist of this book and its major contribution to thought in the region. I am familiar with Ubuntu. I was not familiar with the Omolúwàbí, Nigeria. I know at least something about Pharaonism, and I was born and brought up with this spirit of Harambee, its ups and downs, which Tella tries to document very well. And again, identifying the concrete philosophies equivalent to the Confucianism of China or other philosophies is a great contribution to asserting our own philosophies and saying that Africa has its philosophies. But it goes beyond the philosophies to see how we are deploying culture, art, and other instruments of soft power, basically to assert Africa's role in the 21st century global geopolitics. And that in itself is a very useful flow from the concepts of soft power to the nations that are exercising soft power and to the concrete philosophies that underpin Africa's soft power. That flow depicts a scholar who is at peace and at ease with his area of study, and whose work is now, I would argue, groundbreaking in this regard. I guess what we need to look into the future is not just the weaknesses of these countries, but how Africa's soft power is being challenged by other forms of soft power, particularly from the West, because we are still reeling under the epistemology that is dominantly Western, and that is defining us, including our history. I was looking at Miriam Makeba's clip last night, where she says that our history and everything that is us is defined by the conqueror. And therefore, it's the narrative of the conqueror which suppresses the narrative of the conquered. And soft power, as projected by Tella, basically rescue us from this, depiction of Africa as a child that never grows, depiction of Africa as a wild that must remain primitive, and the fiction of Africa as a child that is always a subject of philanthropy, not borrowing. When we borrow to develop, we are saying, somebody says we have a debt burden. When America borrows, people say it's progressive. All these things are ways in which the old histories and old soft powers of other regions, particularly Western civilization, are weighing on us. And how is China's emerging dominance as the emerging dominant soft power nation going to impact on us as a people and as a civilization? I think these are the questions that the book is now forcing us to rethink in a manner we have never thought before. I would want possibly to see that in the future, as we ground the discussion of soft power, we are also going to look at how we are faring in other forms of power. For example, in hard power, we have been there. We're still strengthening our militaries. Kenya has a big military. Egypt is a major military power. South Africa definitely is a major military power. So in hard power, relative to our weight, we are punching well. And what about smart power, where we are combining soft power and hard power? And what about this noxious idea of sharp power, which reflects the politics of what we are calling the post-truth politics, where fake news and lies and everything about people and countries and continents are coming to bear on our image as a people and a continent. So we again have to interrogate as we move forward. other forms of power that are rising above, a soft power, which may not have that moral, cloud or that moral weight as soft power, but are damaging us, like sharp power, where you're using social media and the so-called Twitteratis, that emerging class of Twitteratis, as warriors waging, a war against our image, depicting Africa in the old style, and us not being able to control the cyberspace. Therefore, we are outgunned and outnumbered. Let me then conclude by saying that I would recommend this book for for all the universities in Africa, if only to assert our own right as a civilization to be recognized as a moral power and also an economic and social power. Africa is emerging as a soft power. Thank you, Tera.
Thank you, Prof. Kagwanja. That was Prof. Kagwanja for you, dear colleagues, endorsing the book without reservation and just making comments that perhaps he would like a little bit more discussion on that includes smart power in addition to exploring soft power. But let me not steal the time. I'm going to move on to Professor Isike so that we can have his brief observations. Prof, try and just keep to the time as much as you can so that our audience can engage with this wonderful panel and this amazing book. Over to you, Prof.
Thank you very much, Professor Madonsela. Permit me to stand on existing protocols so that I don't waste more time. But I want to thank you for giving me or inviting me to discuss this important book, which Dr. Tella aptly describes as seminal. Now, whenever I have been asked to review or discuss a book, I always maintain that it is different from discussing a conference paper. For one, oftentimes the conference paper is yet to be published, so it is helpful to offer useful critiques aimed at improving the paper for publication. A book, on the other hand, is already published, and that gives it a different kind of dynamic. So therefore, I do not see the use in offering critiques as we would do when we discuss conference papers, to books. So I would rather offer, food for thought on possible directions for future research on the subject. This is what I shall, do today, in discussing Dr. Tella's book. Now, since the author himself, even Professor Madonsela and especially also Professor Kagwanja have already done a good job of presenting a summary of the main ideas and contributions of the book. So I will not spend too much time doing the same. I shall therefore give a summarized or a summarized version of my thoughts on the book and focus more on two discussion points, which I feel have not been fully covered in the discussion so far, at least. So let me start by saying that this is a much needed first book on Africa's soft power, as the author claims, and be reiterated by even Professor Kagwanja himself. And it's an important contribution to knowledge of soft power in Africa. The book robustly engaged with the literature on African soft power, as it's systematically covered all the important works that have been done on the subject since 2011, if we're to start with Karen Smith's application of the concept to Africa. So essentially, the book documents the soft power resources, opportunities, and challenges of 4 regional powers in Africa. It makes its case, successfully, if I may add, through its 7 chapters, highlighting the successes and challenges of these major actors in exercising their soft power to achieve their foreign policy objectives. Now, all of these discussions in these chapters dovetailed into the book's concluding chapter, which profiles Africa as a model of soft power with opportunities it can leverage on for rewriting its story from inside with a view to change global stereotypes and perceptions of the continent that oftentimes hampers its development. Indeed, as Dr. Tella concludes, with Africa's rising soft power profile, the continent remains the future of the global economy and provides a model for economic growth. Therefore, to quote him, this was his very last sentence, the extent to which Africa will be able to counteract global Afrophobia will depend on the degree to which the regional powers of Nigeria, South Africa, Kenya, and Egypt, and other states like Angola, Ethiopia, Morocco, and Algeria are able to harness their soft power capabilities, to shape global perceptions of the continent, end quote. Now, for me, that is a very instructive conclusion that Professor Tella makes, and I agree with it, fully. Now, to my two discussion points. The book brilliantly frames its argument within a mix of an African context of soft power that is rooted in African philosophical symbols and Western conceptions and measures of soft power. This, for me, is the first critical contribution the book makes to soft power studies in Africa. The idea of Americanizing the concept of soft power and Africanizing it is crucial to how we take soft power studies in Africa forward. And I'm glad the book extends this imperative, having pioneered it myself within a South African context in a co-published article I did with one of my former postgraduate students, Dikeledi Madise, in 2020. Dr. Tella's engagement with the soft power attributes of the African case studies, which he claims are not captured by nice ideas of soft power, even though they include, culture and ideology, is significant because we all know that Nye certainly did not have Africa in his thoughts on soft power, which are essentially rooted in Western worldviews and culture anyway. So the book's detailed discussion of Nigeria's Omolúwàbí, South Africa's Ubuntu, Kenya's Harambee, and Egypt's Pharaonism are both symbols and philosophies of African soft power essence, which require analysis and theorization. However, as a food for thought for future research on Africanizing soft power, it will help to go beyond the symbolic value of these philosophies or what they represent to analyzing power in an African context. For example, what did power mean in a pre-colonial African sense, and what was its essence? Was power viewed and used for individualistic or collective good? How is this related to the African Union's penchant for consensus and common positions in its engagement with the world? Can we say African understanding and use of power is the same as the liberal conception and use of power? If indeed there are different conceptions and use of political power, would the African soft power be different from Nye's soft power in terms of the purpose? I know that these, were engaged. There was actually some engagement with these questions in page 28 of the book. But I'm saying that these and how they can be converted, to realize power need to be engaged much further in future. Also, on the question of power and its essence, I've been asked by a vocal critic of soft power scholarship whether power in its soft or hard sense does not end up abusing the recipient, since the goal of either is to change the recipient's behavior in favor of the one who is wielding power. And if it does, what is soft about power if its effect is the same? I would like to hear Dr. Tella's answer to this, not just today, especially as I won't be around for the question and answer session, but in continuation of the discourse on Africanizing soft power, which should come in another publication. So to my last point, my last discussion point, the book's extension of the focus on soft power and its literature beyond Nigeria and South Africa is new, and that's quite commendable, honestly. In explaining its methodology and aim, the book succinctly justifies its use of the 4 case studies of Nigeria, South Africa, Egypt, and Kenya. And I must say the chapters on Egypt and Kenya are refreshing additions to the soft power literature in Africa. However, if you ask me, I think Ethiopia would have been a more convincing representative of soft power, or in East Africa, or the Horn of Africa at least, even though like Kenya, it is not on the global soft power index, which was one of the bases for selecting Nigeria, South Africa, and Egypt. Addis Ababa, like Nairobi, projects remarkable soft power and exercises significant influence in Africa. The book does engage with these facts, but argues that Kenya's robust philosophy and cultural output, including Harambee, its fashion, its achievements in athletics, which we just saw recently in the Olympics, the tourism, and having the largest seaport in East Africa towards Kenya above Ethiopia and Tanzania. That argument was made quite persuasively by Dr. Tella in the book. But my reason for raising this is twofold. One, to draw attention to a rising soft power in Africa, which is Rwanda. And two, to give some food for thought on including Rwanda and or Ethiopia for wider representativeness in a follow-up book, which, knowing him, Dr. Tella will write. I have just finished a draft article on the prospects and limits of Rwanda's rising soft power profile, where I teased out some of its soft power resources, such as its genocide history, its post-genocide political culture of gender equality, which has given it global attraction, the resultant tourism attraction that gives, science and technology, the military support to Africa and the world, what I call Rwanda's responsible statism, that is the effective use of state power to deliver public goods, and Paul Kagame's iconic personality, both of which, interestingly, also double as some of the limitations of Kigali's soft power. In spite of these limitations, Rwanda is gaining serious smart power traction, not just in Africa, especially amongst youth of the continent, but also globally. I believe there's enough there to add in a future book on Africa's rising soft power. I will join my colleagues to also endorse this book, especially now that we are on the race to ensure that we have African voices which have been silenced over decades in international relations and international relations theory. Let me stop here and thank you for the opportunity to do this. Thank you.
Isike, thank you for those very brief but powerful observations, and as powerful as those of Prof. Kagwanja. Dear colleagues, again, I'm not going to summarize your response there so as to save time. Perhaps I can point out, though, that you endorse the book unreservedly and say it moves the needle in terms of our understanding of Africa's diplomacy and its current use of soft power and potential for soft power, for more use of that soft power. You do, though, to the rest of the people in the room, Prof. Isike does challenge Dr. Tella to reconsider the 4 giants he has chosen, being South Africa, Kenya, Nigeria, and Egypt, and is wondering whether between Kenya and Ethiopia, it should not have been Ethiopia, or alternatively, that in the next book, consideration be given to including Ethiopia and Rwanda among those that are shaping the future of Africa's soft power in international relations or foreign policy. Right, Prof, Dr. Tella, I'm gonna come back to you before I provide an opportunity for others to ask questions. What do you say to the suggestions? I would say it's not really criticism, but the suggestions and questions from these two colleagues.
Thank you so much, Prof. In response to that, I think with respect to West Africa, it's easy. The choice of the country to engage in the book, it was an easy decision. And the same applies to Southern Africa, because these countries, Nigeria and South Africa, are by far the largest economies in these sub-regions. And their soft power, it's not really challenged by any other country in the regions. Now, with respect to East Africa, it was a bit difficult, I must say, because Kenya's potential hegemony, it's been challenged, not just only by Ethiopia, even to some extent. Tanzania, it's also a powerful force in East Africa. However, given the fact that the focus of the book was to Africanize, not just the Americanize, to Africanize the concept of soft power, I thought that Kenya was better placed to showcase Harambee. I think one thing that I need to point out here is that unlike Nigeria, who hasn't ingrained any philosophy in its foreign policy, with respect to Kenya and South Africa, the foreign policies of these countries are partly informed by the philosophies which I have stated, Ubuntu and Harambee. So this informed Kenyan choice. The reason is just to find a country that can actually show that we can Africanize the concept of soft power with philosophy. Yeah, and now with respect to Rwanda, I understand the fact that Rwanda has a number of soft power resources. As you mentioned, its contribution to the United Nations peacekeeping missions, I think it's #1 in the world. And also in terms of women representation in politics, Rwanda is also #1 globally. Also, with respect to economic growth, particularly prior to COVID-19, Rwanda was #1 in Africa. However, I felt that Rwanda was too small, compared to these other countries. Rwanda has its soft power resources, but it is important to note that why soft power is important, why soft power is critical, but you also need a measure of hard power to be able to project yourself in the international system. And when you look at global rankings, you find out that the most successful soft power states are equally the most successful hard power states. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Tella. I'm going to open the floor for people to ask questions, but let me see if maybe there are already questions in the chat. Okay, I'm not seeing questions yet. And if people are able to either put your questions on the chat or raise your hand, I would appreciate it. Whilst I'm still waiting for questions, I'm going to ask you a question, Dr. Tella. I see that there aren't as many people as I would like to see, and I do think that we need to do more to publicize this book, because like my colleagues, I do think that it opens our eyes to an asset that the continent has and our respective countries have. Tell us a little bit about what's in it for me as an ordinary person. Why should I have an interest in my country's soft power and my continent's soft power if I'm not a student of international affairs or diplomacy? And then there was also that nagging question from Professor Isike about should we be pursuing power in any event, given the fact that power has this potential for domination and hegemony. And for example, if you think about Ubuntu, you think about Harambee, it seems to be a lot about collaboration and appreciating the interconnectedness of humanity. Isn't there a little bit of a tension there between the pursuit of power, whether soft or hard, and these African philosophies that are more humanist in their approach?
Thank you, Prof. Tella. To answer the first question, I think it's important that Africans are familiar with their country's soft power because Africans are seen in negative light. You go to an international airport, your passport is checked like 10 times before you are allowed in. We are seen as drug dealers, we are seen as criminals, we are seen as internet fraudsters. So it's important, even if you are not in the academia, as an ordinary African, you need to be able to challenge these perceptions. We need to be able to challenge the negative sentiments that people across the world have about Africa. We need to be able to celebrate what is authentically Africa. We need to be able to get out of the inferiority complex that we've experienced over the last few decades. So it's important that we as Africans, we familiarize ourselves with the positive aspects of things coming out of Africa. Now, in terms of the essence of power, whether we should pursue power at all, I don't think that's debatable because politics is about power. I think it's in human nature to pursue power. For me, that's not debatable. What we can debate is the essence, the motive for pursuing power. What's the end game of pursuing power? For instance, if an actor, a state, is trying to promote democracy in another state, democratic values are widely celebrated globally. So in a way, it will not only benefit the state exercising power, it will also benefit, in a way, the receiving state. Particularly when you look at it from the context of African Union. The African Union wants democracy, wants good governance, so to speak, on the continent. So if, say, South Africa and Nigeria are promoting democracy in Rwanda, then it's what the continent wants. So I don't think that would be a wrong thing to do. But if these big powers are pursuing their selfish interests, their economic interests, without considering the interest of the recipient state, then we can begin to debate whether it should be pursued or not.
Thank you. Dr. Tella, Prof. Kajwanja has just left and he says, I must convey his congratulations and he will call to convey the same. And then there's from one of those on this call, there's somebody who says, good afternoon, can we buy the book on Jumia? Perhaps you can indicate, Doc, where can people buy this very informative book?
I spoke with my colleague before this meeting, and we agreed that we would send a link to all the participants after the meeting.
Right. Okay, to the participants, a link will be sent to you, and please send it to others. As Dr. Tella has indicated, it might appear to be an issue for those who are studying international relations and diplomacy, but on a closer look, it is something of interest to all of us. And one example he has given us is how Africans tend to be viewed negatively and by leveraging soft power, that can be improved. I also think it also has commercial implications because, as as Doc indicated, soft power is the power of attraction and co-option. And at this stage, we tend to be more co-opted to what the other continents are selling than being co-opted to what is being offered by our own continent, and getting them also to be co-opted to what we're selling beyond just Ubuntu, everything else that's part of our values, culture, and the new African epistemology. Right. The first one is from Adioye Akinola. Congratulations again, Dr. Tella. I'm not an expert on this subject. However, I'm wondering, what are your thoughts on this question? Can we have soft power without economic and military power? Are these mutually exclusive? Prof, do you want to tackle that? It probably also boils down to the question that was asked, I think it was by by Prof. Kakwanja, about soft power and about leveraging soft power and hard power. And I remember Joseph Naye raising a question about it does seem that at the level of international relations, you need soft power, but plus the ability to leverage hard power as a potential.
Yeah, thank you, Prof. I think this points to what has been termed contextual intelligence. Because as I rightly noted, when Professor Chris Isike gave the example of Rwanda, it's not just about soft power. Soft power, it's important, it's critical, but a state must be able to combine the two, not just combine the two, to effectively combine the two. A state must have what is called contextual intelligence to be able to know when it's the appropriate time to use solely soft power, when it is the appropriate situation to use just hard power, and when it is the situation to combine both sources of power. For instance, the promotion of democracy, you don't necessarily need hard power to promote democracy. If your values, if your political values, I mean your domestic values are appreciated and other states see the reason to emulate you because you serve as a model to other states. In fighting terrorism, you need a combination of hard and soft power because fighting terrorism is not just about using your military hardware to combat insurgents or terrorist groups. You need to be able to win hearts and mind. You need to be able to, tell the would-be terrorists the reason not to join terrorist group. And those who are already, particularly the ones that are not so, you have different levels of extremism. So the ones that are, the ones that are not so to the extreme, you can find a way to radicalize them and offer them soft power initiatives, such as de-radicalization and negotiation. Yeah.
Thank you, Prof. What do you say to the specific question, can we have soft power without economic and military power? Could you have some soft power without economic and military power?
Okay, I think I've responded to that because economic and military power are hard power. Economic and military power are hard power. So it's possible to deploy your soft power depending on the situation. You need to have contextual intelligence to be able to read the situation. If you are promoting democracy, if you are offering aid, if you're offering aid to another state, you don't need hard power to do that. But if you are fighting terrorism, you need both hard and soft power to do that. If you are in a war with another state, you will need hard power. You will need hard power to wage your war. So sometimes you use both. Other times you use one of the resources, depending on the situation on ground.
Thank you, Doc. And then from Babatunde Fakabayo, how can the African Union harness the soft power issues you have mentioned in advancing its regional integration pursuits? What an important question. Right now, when we're talking about the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, for example, and just peace efforts. Can you answer that one quickly, Prof?
Yeah, I think I noted in the book that Kenya Harambee actually provides an important resource for Africa. In Africa's quest to find African solutions to African challenges, Kenya Harambee that emphasizes community self-reliance speaks directly to that. That is, one of the important things to know about Harambee is that you have communities that are provided for their needs without necessarily asking for government's help. So in the context of the African Union, we all know that African Union has been funded by external forces. And of course, it's a matter of he who pays the piper dictates the tune. So in our efforts to find African solutions to African challenges, we can adopt the philosophy of Harambee. But also with respect to our efforts to combat COVID-19, for instance, the philosophy of Ubuntu, it's critical. And I think, in fact, President Cyril Ramaphosa noted that the South African diplomacy in the fight against the pandemic would be based on the principle of Ubuntu. So these are actually practical manifestations of these philosophies in the context of African diplomacy.
Thank you, Prof. And then here's the last question from Prof. Samuel Olomuntoba. From Joseph Nye's conceptualization, soft power indicates an attempt to influence other nations to serve the interest of the country projecting the power. Are these African countries with soft powers able to influence countries outside the continent? And he also says, thanks again for giving us something significant to read. Right.
To answer that, I will use an example of South Africa. When South Africa was about to join the BRICS in 2010, South Africa used its soft power. And I think the spectacular example is South Africa's hosting of the 2010 World Cup. The World Cup challenged stereotypes about South Africa and about Africa in general, not just South Africa. I mean, stereotypes of war, of political instability, of backwardness. So with that World Cup, South Africa showcased that to the world that it has emerged as an emerging power, just like the other BRICS countries. And this, among other things, convinced the BRICS states to admit South Africa to the group.
Thank you, Prof. More congratulations from Susie Graham, from Ravinda Rena. Again, just congratulations from Disejo Buyeye and many others. Just everyone thinks this is wonderful. I'm not sure if our colleague, Professor Isike, are you still in the room, sir?
No, he's not, he's left.
He left. And then Dr. Kagwanja said you were leaving, but I see that it looks like you're still in the room. Professor Kagwanja, are you gone? Okay, he is gone. Right. At this stage, I'm going to ask you, Prof, Dr. Tella, to give us your concluding observations and what I often refer to as part course, which is food for the road, just based on everything you've said in this wonderful book what do you want us to take away, and what do you want us to do with it?
Yeah, I think as Africans, we must appreciate what is authentically African. We must challenge the negative stereotypes that we've been associated with and project the positive things coming out of Africa, from Nigerian Ubuntu, from Nigerian Nollywood to South African Constitution, which is regarded as one of the most progressive in the entire world, to Kenyan, to the sources of Kenyan athletes in international sporting competition, to Egypt, pharaonic past, which is critical in terms of challenging Western narrative of Africa.
Thank you again. More congratulations. One professor, Camilla, saying, well done, Dr. Tella. We await the second book. And then we have another, Yasmin, saying, congratulations on the book. Well done to the panelists and the chair and the executive dean. And then we've got Susie Graham. Well put, Dr. Tella. Caroline Trims, thank you, Dr. Tella. You have opened a way to see Africa as powerful, relevant, and noteworthy. And then Patrick Icam, a big congratulations to you, Dr. Tella. And I join everyone in congratulating you in taking these thoughts that are usually in the academic circles and bringing them to ordinary people in the form of something that is portable, something that young people can discuss in various Zoom rooms, in various university circles, and just telling there is a way of seeing Africa beyond the Western epistemology that has characterized how we see ourselves until today and how we see our place in the world. You're also saying that soft power is an important kind of power. It is as important as hard power in that you can move the world, you can influence and co-opt others to your way of thinking through leveraging your soft power. And you've also given us an idea of what are the levers of soft power from the ideologies that underpin the way of life in 4 countries: South Africa, Ubuntu; Kenya, Harambee; Nigeria, Omolúwàbí; and Egypt, Pharaonism. And you have indicated that these philosophies have always been there and are driving developments in those countries, but they can be leveraged better. You've also responded to your colleagues saying that there is a need for a second book, and maybe you could consider adding other countries to that. For me, I must say, Prof. Or Dr. Tella, I now understand why Kenya has produced young entrepreneurs such as Stephen Wamukona, who is a kid, the first person during COVID-19 to come up with an auto sanitary station that now a lot of people have copied and probably made it a little bit more sophisticated. But that was a kid from a village. And it seems to me that the spirit of Harambee, being brought up with that spirit, not only did he have an idea of I can solve this problem, but also he felt that there was a need to make water and sanitation more accessible to people at the time of COVID-19. It now makes sense to me. I also, based on what you have said today and what I've read in the book, understand why Nollywood movies might have indications of people that are dishonest, violent, although they try not to show much of the violence and much of the sexual scenes. But what I found with Nigerian movies is that there's always a value there. There's no getting away with murder. You get away, but by the end of that 4-hour movie, you get what's coming to you. There is no impunity. And now I understand that that comes from the spirit of Omolúwàbí. In South Africa, I do know that even if people are poor, even when things are tough, but there's always an instinct that says, let's share. We've seen that during COVID-19. We've seen that now after the riots, after the arrest of President Zuma, people didn't have to be invited to come and help. They immediately stood up. And I remember, for example, the Chamber of Business in one of the places in KwaZulu-Natal called Ilembe. They quickly, almost overnight, raise money to help a lady. Most of the businesses there, formal businesses, are white, to help a lady whose Shisanyama, which is a braai place, had been burnt down. And because they understand the notion of being an ecosystem, that I am because we are, your success can be my success, and your downfall is mine. And I liked it in the book where you put it this way, where you say that in the spirit of Ubuntu, your pain is my pain, my wealth is your wealth, and your salvation is my salvation. You just think that if the whole world, as we face the Sustainable Development Goals, as we face many challenges in the world, because we have left many of our people behind and because we've messed up our environment, if that spirit of Ubuntu can imbue the entire world, we would not have the problems that we have today. That includes extremism. And then what you said about Egypt, I'm still going to read a lot. I am so fascinated by what this continent did before colonialism. And one of my colleagues at Harvard, Keith Errol Benson, teaches young Black Americans about African history, because he says that no person who is proud of his or her ancestors can ever feel inferior. And what you said about Pharaonism is something that I think we all need to read about, to just understand what this continent has contributed to the rest of the world, and how that can be leveraged to deal with those stereotypes that you spoke about that make Africans searched many times at airports because it's assumed you're running away from your home, whereas we love it here. And some of us have had to tell them that actually I don't want to come to your country. I'm very, very happy where I am. But thank you again, Prof. All I wish for is that more people could lay their hands to this book and then have circles at which we discuss the whole idea of soft power and how it can be leveraged, and what is our role as ordinary citizens in expanding the soft power of our countries and the soft power of our continent. Thank you, Dr. Tella, and congratulations once more on a masterpiece.
The University of Johannesburg, the future reimagined.